Good morning, everyone. I think time is 11 o'clock, so we'll get started and get stuck into this week's topic. So, welcome to week 3 of the weekly Waterjet webinar series. This week we're going to be looking at Waterjet maintenance. So, rather than going through how do you maintain your Waterjet, we're just going to touch on a few topics to do with maintenance, a few recommendations, a few tips and tricks, that kind of thing. Because one of the most common questions I get asked is, how do I maintain my Waterjet? Are they difficult to maintain? What's involved? All that kind of information. So we're going to touch on a few of those things today. Once again, please feel free to type any comments into the questions section, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, so we'll keep this short today, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. Don't take up too much time in your day. Like I said, any questions, type them in, and I'll do my best. Okay, so what we're going to touch on. So first thing I'm going to go through is what maintenance should you do on a weekly basis. Now, I've put weekly because that's just the kind of standard time frame with which to do good general housekeeping tasks. And we'll go through a few bits and pieces to do with that. Second topic will be, how do I know when my Waterjet pump requires maintenance? A lot of people generally want to know, what are the telltale signs? What do I look for? Is it difficult to notice? Is the machine going to help me out in terms of, will it help me recognize when it requires maintenance? The third topic is going to be preventive or reactive maintenance. This is something I'm quite passionate about, and something that Headland's quite passionate about in terms of how do you look after your machine and what's the best way to do it. So we'll go through that and touch on a few topics there. And the last one is a few tips and tricks on how to look after your nozzle to achieve the best results in cutting. Okay, so let's get stuck into it. So first one, Waterjet maintenance, weekly housekeeping. So the general rule of thumb with your weekly housekeeping with your Waterjet is to just basically keep the thing clean. Now, with the OMAX systems, there are traction drive rails. It's not a mechanical drive system, so it's called IntelliTrax. So what that uses is a drive wheel with a drive rail, and the best thing to do is just to give it a wipe down once a week on both the y-axis, as you will be able to see here. On the y-axis there is a drive rail, and also on the x-axis there's a drive rail. So just give those a wipe. Now, they are covered, obviously. The ones on the x-axis, the y-axis ones are open, but the ones on the x-axis are covered. So you can just simply reach your hand in underneath the covers and give them a wipe down. It just keeps everything nice and clean, keeps it moving. The other thing is also just clean down your pump, clean down your tank, and just make sure that the system is kept in a good condition. If you look after your Waterjet, it's going to look after you. All right, it's that simple. Just good housekeeping techniques, good routines to keep the thing in a good condition, and it will continue to perform flawlessly for you, and therefore you'll get high production, minimal downtime, and the thing will just run beautifully. You can see here's just a standard weekly maintenance schedule I've put together. If you have the old style of on-off valve actuators, you might want to, in the warmer months, look at lubricating your O-rings regularly to make sure that keeps actuating as it should, keeps time, therefore stops any potential pressure drops or deadheads which could cause you problems into the future. Clean your nozzle assembly. Now, we're going to touch on that a bit more in the nozzle care tips and tricks later on, but basically you want to keep your nozzle nice and clean. Replace your last chance filter. Again, we're going to cover that as well. We're going to cover that in the nozzle tips and tricks. Tighten swivel mounting brackets. That's more just a case of just give your system the once over, make sure that it's all the screws and everything are tight, nothing's come loose, because that can obviously present issues as well. Clean your monitoring keyboard. Cleaning your monitoring keyboard is it doesn't really need much explanation. You need to keep it nice and clean, therefore continue to function as you want it to. And the keys don't stick down and cause you problems. Change your crankcase, or check your crankcase oil level. This is quite important on the direct drive pump, because you need to make sure that your oil level is maintained. If it drops too low, it can cause damage to your crank. And if it overfills, it can cause problems with the seals. Just make sure you maintain that level of crankcase oil, because the last thing you want to do is run that without enough oil in there, because that will cause you a lot of ongoing problems. Okay, so generally with your housekeeping tasks, just keep the machine clean, check a few simple things. You're going to be checking your pressures every time you start up anyway. That's your nozzle pressure, it's your ADO pressure, things like that. That's just general startup routine, but really just keep the thing clean. That's the best way to do it. All right, we'll move on to the next subject. So what are the signs that my pump needs maintenance? Now, depending on the type of pump you have, and there's a few different types out there, I'm going to concentrate on the main two. The first one being a direct drive pump, which is all that Omax supply, and the other one being the hydraulic intensifier pump, which historically has been the kind of industry standard for Waterjet systems. Okay, so with a direct drive, one of the biggest things you're going to notice, one of the biggest signs you're going to see that will indicate that your pump requires maintenance is the fact that you're having to increase your RPM on the pump, on the motor, to achieve the pressure you require. Now, if you start to get to a threshold level, then you know that obviously something's wearing inside, such as the dynamic seals, that they're going to require replacement. Okay, so it's always good to have a threshold level that you know and think, okay, once I hit this level, then I'm going to do some maintenance. And it also gives you a good indicator as to how your pump's performing, what your water quality is doing, what your water temperature is like, things like that that'll help you keep the system running perfectly. The other thing is, if you're struggling to make your desired pressure, like I said, not just through the RPM, but just generally, if you see a large pressure drop when you're running at what you know to be a good RPM, then you obviously have an issue, then you're going to need to do some maintenance to rectify that. On all of our Omax pumps, we have 3 what we call coolant lines, which are basically water that is pumped over the plungers, just to keep things nice and cool, keep things moving sweetly. And they are good indicators, telltale signs of how your dynamic seals are performing. If they're starting to wear, then water can get past them and into the cooling circuit, and excessive water then starts to come from the cooling lines. And that is the telltale that your dynamic seals require replacement. So again, all these things can come together as simple checks, and it's just a quick visual 2-second check. What's the water like coming out of the coolant lines? Oh, it looks great, carry on. Oh, it's coming out a bit more than usual. I think I might need to do some maintenance. The other one, and normally if you get to this level, it's you've left it too long, is the wet end heating up. Now, what I mean by the wet end is the stainless steel components you see on the end of the pump, at the end attached to the crankcase. This is where all your UHP water is generated. These shouldn't be getting hot. If they get hot, that normally is a telltale sign that something isn't sealing correctly, and it's allowing UHP water past where it should be going, and therefore that water leaking past is transferring the energy into heating the components. So if you feel your check valves, your cylinders, anything like that, and they're getting warm, then you need to do maintenance because something in there isn't sealing correctly. Now, looking at the hydraulic intensifier pump, as with the high RPM on the direct drive, what you're going to be looking for is the piston on the hydraulic system stroking quickly. If that piston starts to stroke quickly, then obviously means that it's struggling to maintain pressure. Therefore, that water's leaking somewhere, and you're going to need to go in there and do some maintenance to fix that. Another one, when your nozzle is closed on a hydraulic intensifier pump, the intensifier should stall out pretty much. It shouldn't really be moving. The piston should just pretty much sit there. So, but if your piston is continuing to stroke when the nozzle is closed, then obviously that water's going somewhere, so you have a leak or you have a faulty seal that requires replacement. So again, when the nozzle's closed, if it's still stroking your intensifier, then you need to do some maintenance. Similarly, with the wet end heating up on the direct drive, if your end caps or your cylinders or even your check valve bodies start to heat up as well on a hydraulic intensifier, then you obviously have something that's not sealing correctly, water's leaking past, transferring the energy into heat, exactly the same as the direct drive, and you're going to need to get in there and perform some maintenance. Also, on the hydraulic intensifier, you generally have a few weep holes within the wet end assembly on either end of the intensifier. So if you have water weeping out of any of those, again, you need to go in and do some maintenance. Okay, so as you can see with both systems, there's a number of things that will tell you whether maintenance is required. Okay, but this is more a reactive style of maintenance, which we're going to touch on in a second. The best way of getting around this is to do preventive maintenance. Okay, which leads me beautifully into this slide. Okay, so what's the best way to maintain your water? Is it preventive? I can't speak. Preventative or reactive maintenance? My suggestion is always to do preventative maintenance. Okay, now why? Well, if you do preventative maintenance rather than reactive, it allows you to predict your maintenance schedules. So you can sit there and plan when you're going to do the maintenance on your machine rather than waiting for it to break and then having to react and therefore extending your downtime. If you plan your maintenance schedules, you can then minimize downtime because you know exactly when you're going to be stopping it, you know how long it's going to be down for because you know what you're going to be doing, you know what parts you're going to be replacing, rather than thinking, oh, it's broken, I need to go in there and fix something, but I don't know what it is I need to fix. So whereas if you plan your maintenance, you know what you're going to be replacing, you can have the parts available and you can minimize your downtime. Another advantage, it gets you in the position where you can start to really control your maintenance costs because you know what parts you're using, you know how long you're going to be down again. All these things help reduce your maintenance costs and help you run your Waterjet in a much more cost-effective, efficient manner. To help you with your preventative maintenance schedules, you can use a part of the IMAX software suite called IntelliVisor. What this does is it's a piece of software which talks to the machine. It monitors sensors. It helps you set up maintenance alarms. You can do set up so it can send emails out to anybody in the organization. And it can also help you control your abrasive level as well. So you can set the system up that it will send out warnings to the operator or warnings and error messages to somebody else via email. And it can help you monitor your maintenance. So it will send you up a message saying, hey, just so you know, you've got in 50 hours, you're due to do, you know, X procedure. You know, in 500 hours, you're going to want to do this again. And it just helps you monitor the system and it helps you plan preventative maintenance. And it's a really, really useful system and it's really underused by a lot of users of Waterjets. And it's a fantastic way of just keeping track of everything, planning and making sure that everything runs smoothly. Okay, so lastly, like I said, we're going to keep it pretty short and sweet this week. So keep it to 10 to 15 minutes. So this will be the last slide. One of the other things I get asked a lot about is nozzle care. You know, how do you look after your Waterjet nozzle? What's the best way of making sure you get really long life out of your nozzle assembly? One of the things I strongly recommend people do is get themselves an ultrasonic cleaner with your Waterjet. If you get yourselves an ultrasonic cleaner, you can put your nozzle body in it once a week. And what that does is that can break off any mineral buildup which you can get on your orifice surface, so the surface of the jewel, because any kind of interruption to the flow of the water coming through that hole on the orifice assembly will give you what looks like a bad jet. So essentially speaking, you could have just a mineral buildup and you think your nozzle's broken, you think the jewel's gone and needs replacement. Whereas if you put it in an ultrasonic cleaner, it breaks that off and your nozzle's as good as new again. It's good to go and you're going to get many more hours out of it. So my strong suggestion is if you have a Waterjet, get yourself an ultrasonic cleaner. It's one of the best things you can do to help prolong the life of your nozzles. Now, mixing tubes. These will probably be your highest wear items on a Waterjet. Little tip for you to help you extend the life of your Waterjet, or life of your mixing tubes, I should say, is to turn that mixing tube just 90 degrees every morning. It takes no more than a few seconds to do. Just back off the locking nut, turn it 90 degrees, tighten it back up again. You do that, and it's going to spread out the wear that coming down that mixing tube. So what you need to remember is the abrasive stream and the Waterjet doesn't just go straight down the middle of the mixing tube. It actually rifles down it, just by the nature of how the abrasive is introduced into a jet stream. All nozzles do it, regardless of make or model. So it rifles down mixing tube. So if you leave that mixing tube in the same position, what ends up happening is the end of the mixing tube, which you can just about see here on this picture, ends up being oval instead of round. Whereas if you turn it 90 degrees approximately, doesn't need to be exact, every morning, what does spreads that wear out, so it continues to then wear in a round form. And what that'll do is make sure that your mixing tube life is prolonged, and you'll get many more hours out of it than if you just leave it in the same position. The last thing as well, which a lot of people tend to neglect, but is a really critical part to making sure you contain a good flow of water through your orifice assembly, is to replace your last chance filter regularly. Now, these come in different shapes and forms. This is just one type you can see on the screen here, which OMAX supply with their standard motorized Z assemblies. If you don't replace these regularly, then obviously the water flow coming through them can get restricted and be interrupted and give you a bad flow of water through the orifice assembly, which then means you get a bad cut. And it also means you can reduce the life of your mixing tube as well, because the flow of water coming through it just isn't uniform. So all these things, ultrasonic cleaner, rotate your mixing tube, replace your last chance filter regularly, all go a long way to making sure that your Waterjet functions and your nozzle functions, you get maximum life and maximum cutting efficiency out of it for the hours to come. Okay, so they are some simple bits and pieces regarding Waterjet maintenance. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email address is mattheww@headland.com.au. More than happy to answer any Waterjet related questions. Any tips and tricks that you want as well in the future, please feel free to contact me on that address as well. And we'll be back again next week, same time, same place, for some more Waterjet tips. Okay, thank you everybody.